everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Unraveling the Veil with your host, Katie from the yararose.com website. That is YARAROSE.com. You can also follow me on @YaraRoseHealing on both YouTube and Instagram to keep up with what's going on with me. Now let's get to today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast episode. I'm so excited to have you all here today. And today we are in for a treat. We have Bob Violino, who is the author of Life Lessons, How I've Learned to Embrace Gratitude, Positivity, Resilience, and Joy, here with us today to share his experience and talk a little bit about his book in case it may be of service to you in your journeys wherever you are. Hi, Bob. Welcome to our podcast.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited for you to be able to share your experiences with my audience. And I always like to give them different perspectives because you never know what's going to resonate with who and where they are in their journey. So I'm really excited about sharing your book with them. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I'm a business and technology journalist. I've been doing this for more than 40 years, the last 23 as a freelancer. I've written actually 2 books before this one relating to organ transplant recipients, the other one a book about Christians doing good works, and then there's the latest book, Life Lessons. I also have a blog, Embracing Gratitude and Positivity, which I started in 2023.
Perfect. You said your longer range career was more technical writing. So what was the transition, or did you always want to get to telling your story and sharing your experiences, or is that just organic how that happened?
Yeah, it's kind of organic. I'm more of a business writer who writes about technologies. I wouldn't strictly call it technical writing. And I've always had an interest in writing about people. You know, the previous books were about other people and they had nothing to do with technology. And I kind of always had a kind of an idea of writing a book, a self-help book. And what triggered this really are some events that happened over the last few years that were life-threatening. And I came to realize, time, I don't have forever. If I want to do something, there's no time like the present. And I also felt I needed to write something that had kind of a purpose to maybe help other people.
Yeah.
Potentially. And a few people suggested that I write a book somewhat based on my own experiences. So Life Lessons is based largely on the blog, but it's much more in depth, a lot more examples and anecdotes. And I also include respected research to back up points that I make.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's something you could say I've wanted to do, but maybe I just needed a little bit of a push.
Yeah, there you go. You
Get
did
it
get
done.
encouragement.
Yeah.
Time is now. Seize the opportunity. I love that. And actually, I don't know, not that anyone else can see this, but did you see the phrase that I have on the back wall? When I read your preview of your book, it's in your second chapter. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's
That's a
keep your
great quote.
thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behaviors become your habits. Keep your habits positive because your habits become your values. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny.
Yeah, it's a great quote.
So I always, when I think about buying a book, I check out, the sample, which is, I think, what a lot of people would do. And that really struck me with oh my gosh, we have the exact same quote. And it's so important to both of us that we're sharing it somehow in some way. That's awesome. And then also what I really loved about your intro is you talk about, how a lot of people think that learning is in a schoolroom. And there's so many lessons we learn through our life experiences. And that's what I really resonated with because I have learned so much stuff through my life experiences that I never thought I would learn. And we're always learning. And I think it's so cool to acknowledge that and to share, oh my gosh, Bob, you're amazing. The stuff you've been through and the fact that you are using those experiences to facilitate and promote positivity and resiliency and joy. And it's amazing to me. So why don't we tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. So a lot of the experiences are challenges that I faced, but also opportunities, and you're right. Things that we're not taught in school, whether it's in grade school or, high school, college, whatever, are kind of the practical things that happen in life that you may not expect. Like, for example, losing a job.
Yeah.
They don't teach you, what do you do when you lose your job? They teach you how to get one. They prepare you for that. I mean, I'm sure there are classes and, like psychology or whatever that teach you how to bounce back from setbacks. An example is I lost my job in 2002. I was kind of thrust into this really difficult job market. And at that point in my career, I was, kind of well advanced, let's say, in my career.
Mm-hmm.
I was freaked out. And what am I going to do now? I still have a mortgage to pay back, a family to support. And what do I do?
Yeah.
And I decided after I was not getting opportunities with full-time employers that I would freelance. I'd give it a try, and it's worked out great. Here we are, 23 years later. Thank goodness I've been blessed to have a successful career, and it's opened up a lot of opportunities. Been able to cover topics that I wouldn't maybe not have been able to cover had I stayed
Yeah.
with my job, and I've gotten meet a lot of nice people. It's been successful. So you never know where life is going to point you
Right.
when something even as devastating as a job loss
Yeah.
occurs. And these days, there's a lot of fear, with AI replacing people, certain jobs. And, it's I think, important to realize that there's always other directions you can go in. It may not have been what you wanted or expected, but it could work out great, potentially. So, don't despair and just keep trying. So, yeah. And really, a lot of the other things like gratitude and positivity and making the most of the present moment and,
Mm.
setting goals for yourself or, how to manage anxiety and things like that. The importance of the right attitude. Those are not formal things we learn
No.
through,
No.
through education.
Right.
We might have really good teachers who teach us things like that, but for the most part, life teaches us
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and I feel like even with job loss, there's so many times people lose their jobs and it has nothing to do with their skill set or how they were performing. And I think that sometimes it's very difficult in a personal perspective to say, this wasn't because of my work. This wasn't because I did anything wrong. There's nothing for me to be ashamed of. This was just our paths are now diverging. And this is actually an opportunity for what is it I want to do now? I don't know about you, but when I'm like in the midst of a work environment, I very rarely go, okay, well, what do I want to do now? Like, what would I actually, if this was no longer here, what would I actually want to do? So it actually presents you that opportunity to reflect and be like, maybe this is meant to be. Maybe this is helping promote me to be where I actually want to go.
Yeah, that's so true. And what you say about people losing their job through no fault of their own,
Right.
it's hard because you ask yourself, well, why? Why did this happen?
Yeah.
And it might just be because there's another better opportunity waiting out there.
Mhm.
And I guess we should all probably think about what do we want to be doing? What's the next thing we want to be doing?
Yeah.
Just in case we can't do what we're doing now.
Mhm.
And not to live in fear of losing your job or
No.
even try to bring it about if you like where you're working, but just to, have that in mind in case the time comes, because it is, I can tell you, it's overwhelming. I don't know if you've lost a job, but it can be one of the most difficult things you face. And I've faced some serious health issues, but I have to say that losing jobs are some of the most difficult things I've had to face. And it's happened a couple times. Once potentially because of health reasons, but layoffs,
Mhm.
belt tightening by the company. In one case, the company just went out of business
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
So, these things happen, but
Yeah.
resilience is probably one of the most important lessons because we need the ability to bounce back, rather than spiral
Yeah. Yeah.
control. So, that's definitely one of the most important ones.
Yeah, and to me as well is like in the last several years, I've been learning about how the stories we tell ourselves. So it's very easy in a situation like that where you lose your job to tell yourself, that you're a loser or you did something wrong or you're never going to get out of here. Or maybe you could tell yourself, I did all of the right things and this is what happened. So what sense is there for me to do more right things? Because obviously I don't get rewarded for that. So it's like catching yourself before you get too far in the spiral where then you have a really hard time getting yourself back out and just being like, okay, but is the story I'm telling myself true? Do I really know that that's the case? Does that feel in my heart like that's true? And then questioning that story because these also present opportunities for healing as well. What stories have you been telling yourself that maybe it's time for you to heal so that way the next job that you get or the next career you create for yourself, you're no longer holding on to those stories and you elevate yourself in your healing process and you can create a great life without those
Mhm,
stories no longer holding you down like an anchor.
mhm. Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, my next blog post is going to be about self-compassion,
Yes.
which is something we all need more of and
You do.
and often lack. And that's exactly what you explained, like speaking poorly about yourself,
Mhm.
and calling yourself names or whatever. It's, I think, really harmful because,
Yeah.
you may not think, oh, it's just me talking to myself. It's just that inner voice is where, what's the big deal? It's not
Yeah.
somebody else doing that. but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
perhaps the most important person in your life and outside of your spouse and children. And it's really important to stop that habit. Say something instead like, well, I didn't deserve this to happen. It's not fair.
Right.
Life is not fair.
Mhm.
But I did great work here. I accomplished a lot. I impressed a lot of people. I can take that with me to my next job if I want to, if it's related. I can pat myself on the back for working really hard and giving it my best. This is no fault of my own,
Mhm.
and I move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. You actually have a section, I can't remember which chapter it was, where you talk about the voice inside your head and what it's saying to yourself. And when I talked about this on a podcast episode myself, but I was bullied a lot in school. So, but by the time I got to a certain age, I didn't even need the bullies telling me anything because the bully had become my own mind. And I would tell myself these terrible things all the time that had been echoed from them for years. And like I became the worst bully in my entire life. And it took me a long time to stop bullying myself and to extend myself more grace and self love and compassion, and that I didn't deserve that. And that's not true, that I'm not worthless. It's so important because I think that people, like I actually had a coworker a couple years ago that he was like, you mean the thoughts in my head aren't who I am? And I was like, absolutely not. They're a collection of every influence you've had throughout your life. And then when you become adulthood, that's when you get to start weeding out what is true for me. Is this true? Is this true? And that's where you really get to figure out who you are and how you want to show up in your life. And when you're talking about, losing a job or leaving a job, even, I always say, okay, but do I feel good about how I performed when I was there? Can I look back at that experience and say, I'm proud of how I showed up? And that's all you can do. Then go on and use what you said, the skills, the lessons, the contacts that you grew while you were there, and use that in your next chapter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think bullies are the worst.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, a lot of it's kids,
Yeah.
being kids. But especially with internet, I didn't have this growing up. There was no internet, there were no computers, no cell phones,
Mm.
social media.
Yeah.
And, I can't imagine what it's like now being,
Yeah.
child or, it's really harmful because, like you said, it puts these ideas in your mind and then you can become a bully yourself,
Yeah.
which is not who you are.
No.
And so I think that whole idea of, and I don't recall either, I don't recall what chapter that was in, that listening to the voice in your mind, but it might have been the one about better ways of thinking, or
I'm
there
not
was a
sure.
chapter about that, some of the ways of thinking to avoid. And I think that's probably one of them.
Mhm.
And it's something that we have to learn. Like a lot of other stuff, it takes practice and
Yeah.
persistence to learn how to change our thinking.
Well, and even things like your book, my podcast that encourage you to be like, no, that's not your truth. That's just what you think your truth is. That's why I do what I do is there's so many people out there that think that by the time they've reached, I don't know, college level or high school level, whatever their level of education is, that that's who they are. They kind of pigeonhole themselves into like, well, this is who I've been told I am my whole life. And it takes self-awareness to be like, but do I want more from myself or do I want to believe that this is what I want to do? And then it takes courage to extend beyond your comfort zone and see if maybe you could be more or if that's even true that you're worthless. Like that was a terrible one for me to overcome. But I do love that I think you even said earlier that it's not just the really big trials that you had in your life, that you had health crisis, you had job loss, multiple job loss, but it's the day-to-day things too. And it reminded me of Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, where his whole life was altered by the simple thought that he was with a friend one night and all of a sudden he like was paying attention to the thoughts coming into his mind. And he had this one where he was like, I need to say something. This is so awkward. And like that tiny little moment in time, that little moment of being aware and self-aware it started this whole life mission for him to be like, well, who is the little voice in my mind telling me that? And if I'm witnessing that little voice, then who actually am I? And that was powerful. So I love that your book has everything. It has the big things and it has the little things and it has the whole like progression of how it's not just one time that you make these decisions either. It builds on each other.
Yeah, and I think too, these lessons can be relearned
Yeah.
continuous. It's in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily learning the new lesson, but relearning it or reinforcing it,
Mhm.
revisiting it, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a constant thing. It's a work in progress. We are all works in progress,
Yeah.
and we're all capable of change
Mhm.
too.
Mhm.
People who've committed crimes and gone to prison can reform and
Yeah.
do great works. And nobody's redeemable. So
Yeah.
we can all recover from mistakes. I mean, in most cases, in some cases, I guess you can't, but there's always hope.
Yeah.
And we should always be open minded, I think, about the possibilities that are out there and, what we can do with our skills, our talents, our personalities.
Mhm.
We all have gifts. There's all gifts that we haven't noticed in ourselves or found out about that we can take advantage of it whenever we're ready to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes life gives you a little nudge too, like, "Oh, you didn't think of yourself as this," and then all of a sudden this opportunity falls in your lap, and if you're open to it, you're like, "Okay, I'll try it," and all of a sudden you find out that you actually are really good at it, and you just didn't know about it.
Yeah. And it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to learn a craft or some, art, music, whatever, acting, and it doesn't become your livelihood.
Right.
It can still be a great pastime or hobby
Yeah.
that you can do just for the joy of doing it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just started writing my first work of fiction. It's a science fiction fantasy novel, completely out of left field. It is difficult
Yeah.
writing. It is nothing like nonfiction because you're creating characters, you're
Mhm.
putting life into the characters, you're creating scenes with places where they live, you're creating worlds and
Yeah.
dialogue, and it's just totally different. And I'm finding it both a struggle and a joy because
Yeah.
it's not like anything I've written before, and it may go nowhere. I may not even publish it ever,
Right.
but just to work on it, I think is kind of cool, and we'll see where it goes. But everybody I've mentioned it to, my family or friends, they're thrilled. Wow, that's so cool,
Yeah.
and it's so different than anything I've written before.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
But it's stretching yourself. You already have the ability. You've been writing for years, and it's saying you probably were inspired somehow, right? It came to you somehow, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna lean into that. I'm gonna see where this goes, and if it doesn't go anywhere, as long as I'm having fun, it doesn't matter."
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not completely out of left field. I should correct myself. It's about AI is a central part of it, and
Okay.
AI out of control. And I write about AI in my freelance work quite a bit. Everybody wants to read about it and write about it. So editors are asking for AI stories. And so I have a lot of familiarity with it and what can go wrong or what its flaws are. And so that's a big part of the book. Guess it's sort of related to my work, but the writing is completely different, obviously, than an article I would turn into an editor.
Sure.
So yeah, we'll see.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, yeah.
But I wanted to say, when I read your book and I was reading about the health challenges, and I know I told you this in our message, but it reminded me of Rescued by Ruby, that movie, and also Miracles from Heaven. Are you familiar with either of those?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
No, it's okay. That's fine. They're both based on true stories. Rescued by Ruby is about a rescue dog that had trouble staying in a placement. So it was going to lose its life, but the next one didn't work out. And then the next one happened to be a police officer who was trying to get in the canine unit, and he took a chance and they worked together and they ended up doing that, and it was amazing, and it was just great. And then the other one was about a little girl that got an incurable disease, and it was about her family's journey of going to doctor after doctor and specialist after specialist, trying to do anything they could. But then she miraculously fell, had like an accident down a tree, and got healed, and it was an incurable disease. So like their miracle, really good, awesome, based on true stories. But the thing that I really resonated with is in each of them, there's these little, almost like miracles or signs from the above or whatever you want to call it, where it's at the right place at the right time, this thing happened, and then this thing happened. And there's these little, I call them earth angels, which are basically just people that choose kindness, choose love, follow that prompting. Even like the family in the girl's case, they were so blinded by their desperation to save her. They were missing all the little miracles along the way of their journey where, this person would take off work and all of a sudden hang out with them, even though they're a complete stranger, because they just resonated with that story and just wanted to be there to support them. Or there was this other lady at the airport that made her computer crash because she knew that the airline tickets that they were purchasing wasn't going to go through because they didn't have the funds, but they wanted them to be able to be with her. So these little miracles along the way. And you had so many of those. If you talked about your health crises, people may say that you're unlucky. But when I look at them all and I like read all the little pieces there, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so blessed, because to have gone through that, but then had the right people right there at the right time, it's a blessing.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, some of it you could explain away by, it just happened to be that was coincidental or whatever. But, in a case like with the cardiac arrest that I had in 2022, it was a situation where, I was feeling chest pains
Mhm.
and they didn't go away. Now, I felt these sensations before and they went away. They always went away.
Okay.
This time it didn't. And then I started getting a tingling in my arm And my wife, Renee, said, okay, that's it. I'm calling 911. And I went to the hospital, the local hospital ER, and was there. They were checking me out, doing blood tests. Everything seemed fine. In fact, one of the nurses said, well, we can tell you did not have a heart attack. We can tell from the blood test results. And then just moments later, cardiac arrest. And it took 9 minutes, so a little, almost 10 minutes to revive me. There happened to be a cardiologist there on call who was not usually there. It was a Sunday morning, and he's not usually there at that time.
Mhm.
He immediately took charge of the situation, and and there were also a bunch of nurses and technicians also there who, happened to be there on that day, and they revived me
Yeah.
against all odds, because cardiac arrest, the odds are not great. If you have a cardiac arrest in a hospital, I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but I believe it's between 10 and 20% survival rate, and outside I think is even worse.
That's insane.
So, I was very fortunate. And also to have survived with seemingly no major cognitive damage
Yeah.
is also incredible
Yeah.
against the odds. So, in that case, yeah, I mean, was it a miracle? Part of me thinks it was. I'm almost afraid to say, this is a miracle to declare, because it's not in my place to declare something a miracle. Also, my kidney transplant, which I received from my wife, Renee, in 1995. We happened to be a good enough match, and the operation was scheduled for what happened to be our 25th wedding anniversary, October 25th. No planning of our own. And, things signs like that, it's almost hard to dismiss
Yeah.
as being, just a coincidence, didn't get over it. Because, the transplant itself was not a miracle. It was a brilliant surgeon.
Yeah.
I credit him.
Yeah.
2 surgeons, one for my wife and one for me.
Mm.
And that I'm not gonna take away credit from them and the healthcare staff, which that cared for us, because they deserve the credit. It wasn't a miracle in that sense.
Mhm.
But the whole, juxtaposition of things, the whole confluence of events sometimes leaves you wondering, there's more here than what meets the eye, that science can't prove why this happened.
Right. Yeah. That's
And
what I love. I was
yeah.
hoping you would share that. 'Cause
And there's even far more mundane things. Like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I was thinking about somebody who I hadn't seen, spoken to, or heard from in decades pop into my mind, and within a minute or less, got an email from that person.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
and it's just unexplainable.
Yeah.
It really is. We either have far more capabilities in our brains than science and medicine have a clue about, or it's divine. It's a
Yeah.
divine occurrence.
Yeah.
There really aren't a lot of other explanations. Coincidences, okay, that's one thing, but that's just extraordinary for
That's where
something.
I always get to like, okay, but 1 or 2 things is a coincidence. But when you have that many stacked upon that many, there has to be more order to this than there. It's just, it seems statistically impossible that there would be that many that just fell into place, But,
Yeah, yeah.
my listeners know that I'm totally into that. So,
Yeah, I agree, and, then there was that car accident I had back in the '80s, and that was a case where, I didn't have my seatbelt on, and I got thrown out of the car. I got hit by one car and then another, got thrown onto the concrete, hit my head, and I remember the doctor in the ER saying, you're very, very lucky to have survived that," and I hate to even say this now, but he said, if you had been wearing your seatbelt, you might not have come out of this alive, but I am in no way, shape, or form endorsing people not wearing this. I've worn one ever since.
yeah.
Anyway, again, just weird circumstances. I feel like I've been given multiple chances.
Yeah.
Can't just ignore these things. And I think partly maybe that also inspired me to write about this stuff, because I couldn't leave this unshared. I have to leave this behind. And you could say, wow, that guy's had a lot of he's kind of cursed. That's the complete opposite, the way I look at it. Yeah, I would rather have done without the pain part of it, the fear part of it, the anger part of it, the frustration part of it, but that's all part of it.
Yeah.
And but otherwise, you look at these events, and my goodness, we wouldn't be here speaking right now if any of those things had gone another way.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's why I'm just like, I know from the outside it may look like he is unluckiest guy ever, but I just feel like you're just so blessed. And it's just wow, for that to have happened that way, and I don't want to give too much away, but like for that to have happened that way, that is so amazing. Like a theme that I've been having in my own mind lately is sometimes we go through these hard hardships because in experiencing them, we are better able to help others also go through them. And that's what you're helping others to do is if whether they had, kidney disease or if they've been in an accident and they're trying to go, how do I see this in a positive light? I wasn't doing anything wrong. It wasn't my fault. It just seems like it kind of came out of nowhere. How can I turn this around or how can I see this in a bright way or a different perspective? And I love that you're sharing that with people. I love that you're using these as opportunities for them to see a different way to look at things that happen.
Mhm. Yeah. I would also point out too that you could say it's been life altering for me. Like if I don't survive the car crash, there's no transplant.
Mhm.
I'm not here. If there's no transplant, there's no cardiac arrest. I'm not here. So I've been blessed with more time in life, but that also welcomes the possibility of other things happening. And this is true of anybody who's undergone a life-saving situation.
Yeah.
And in no way, shape, or form do I want or need or accept pity. That to me is worse in some
Oh, yeah.
ways than things that
Yeah.
happen because there are people out there in the world who've gone through far more than I have, far more in different ways, whether it's physical or emotional, psychological. They've gone through a lot. And it's just that they don't write books about it. So, or they don't share it. They either don't want to or they can, whatever. But we all have crosses to bear, all have difficulties and some more than others. And some can handle things more than others can. And I always appreciate when people say things like, gee, that your resilience is inspiring to me because I don't know if I could have survived that, or I know a lot of people who wouldn't.
Mhm.
They would have just been. But we all have resilience built in. That's a human trait. I don't know. Probably comes from the earliest days when we had to survive attacks by animals and living in caves. And I think we all have resilience built into us, and we also can learn to be more resilient.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to leave that message that I know there are people out there who've struggled mightily in life and suffered a lot. And it's something that is part of the human existence,
Yeah, human experience. It's part of the human
experience.
experience, and
Yep.
everyone has a different story, and by no means should you compare your story to anyone else's. I mean, none of us can because we haven't all been in that person's shoes through their whole life. Because I feel like as you go through life, it kind of builds on your previous experiences. Like we talked about that, it's kinda like peeling an onion, like maybe you had to let go of control a little bit with this one, and then the next one, it's a bigger opportunity to let go. That's what my life has been like anyways. It seems like every time I go around and like, "Oh, I thought I healed this already," and then it's like, "Oh, but this is deeper. This is deeper. This is deeper." It's like learning it to the max degree. And
Yeah,
I think sometimes people do get discouraged or get lost sometimes when they try comparing their story to someone else's because it's simply none of us are comparable in that way.
that's true.
We all have such a unique experience.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. That goes across the board. I think like people, we're constantly comparing. We
Yeah.
compare ourselves to other people, to their jobs, houses, cars, family, and how they handle things. And we're all unique.
Mhm.
We all have our own ways of living and dealing with things, and it really doesn't do any good to compare yourself to others, you
Mhm.
know? Most of us are never gonna be movie stars. Most of us are never gonna be billionaires or millionaires.
Right.
So, that envy and that's one of the I know I mentioned that in one of the chapters about the uselessness of envy or how it can be harmful, and I think it's important to get over that, just be grateful for what we've achieved and what we have and who we are.
Yeah, I do think there's an extra challenge with that, with social media being so rampant because people are only showing their highlight reels. And honestly, I was just thinking about confidence because some people think that confidence looks a certain way based on what they see and what they perceive. But some like I always go back to I have a podcast episode about the Danny Tanner from Full House. He was famous. He was a comedian. He was on this Full House show for years. He was on America's Funniest Home Videos. And even him, after all of this time later in life, he still hustled every single day and he still doubted whether he'd be able to fill seats because you don't know the internal dialogue that other people have. So what you would think was him being confident, him being sure of himself, but inside you don't know what's going on in there. You know? What you know about yourself and what your internal dialogue is compared to what you're seeing on someone else. They could have the same internal dialogue that you have going on, but you don't see that, you're not perceiving that, and you're looking at yourself as less than.
True.
Just dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true. I remember reading about famous people who, like whether it's a celebrity actor or politician, or about they still held on to some of their fears.
Yeah.
even long after becoming tremendous successes, and they still had self-doubt,
Yeah.
like you said, and to hear that is almost it's encouraging because you realize, wow, we're all human beings, and we all
Yeah.
have subject to the same emotions and difficulties, and there's no sense in saying, "Wow, I wish I could be like that person," and I think also maybe the only good that can come out of something like that is it maybe pushes you to do what you wanna do.
Mhm.
If you want to be a famous person or an actor, an artist, a singer, a mathematician, whatever, you just
Yeah.
work at it. We all are capable of doing that. We all have such potential for doing great things.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Is there any other thing that when you think of your book and how you want my audience to take the main message away is, what would that be for you?
I think the lessons that I chose to include in the subtitle, the focus on positivity, gratitude, resilience, and joy, are all key things that we need to, and of course, there's many others, but we all need to utilize these things. We all need to be more grateful. We all need to be more positive, to be more resilient. We all need to be more joyful. And we can do this. It's within our control. We make
Yeah.
the choice. You wake up in the morning, you say, well, okay, I think I'm going to be miserable today, but I think I'm going to be happy. And we kind of do have a lot of things are out of our control. You can't control the weather. You can't control what other people do
Right.
or say or think, but you can control your own attitude
Yeah.
and make decisions about how you want to handle things. And I hope that readers take those lessons and all the others to heart and gain something from the book. I got a lot of feedback from people saying, I keep it on my nightstand, and I've been looking at different chapters, and I'm going to revisit different things to make sure I caught everything in that particular chapter, whatever it was they were looking for. To me, as an author, that's very heartening. That's very encouraging and a joy to hear because that's exactly why I wrote this. Not to make money. I know it's never going to be a big seller, but just to help other people out.
Right. Yeah, I actually did think about that when got done with the book. I was like, really, this would be one of those ones where you could just lay down somewhere. And if you are having a difficult time with whatever, you could go to whatever, like if it's patience or procrastination or something, you could go to that chapter and just read it and let it sit with, and like almost like meditate slash reflect with it and just give yourself a reset. It will help you. Okay, I know this is what I'm trying to work on. This is like a muscle. I just have to build it. I just have to practice with it. And so, I mean, the more you do it, obviously, the easier it's going to get. But then sometimes the challenges get harder. So that way it's like, oh, you got to relax more. You got to release more. You got to surrender more. It does get easier because you're like, oh, I've done this before. I know that I'm going to be okay. I know that I'm thinking I'm not going to be okay. Like if I lost my job or something, but I do know, and I have been in a position where I have been in a crisis before and I've been okay. So why would this be any different?
Yeah, excellent points.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Where can everybody like follow you, your blog, all of that information? Can you give them that here?
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon.com and on BarnesandNoble.com. Also available through BookPal, which is a service I use for bulk shipments of the book. Like organizations want to purchase a copy, it's at a discount. And my blog is inspirations-blog.com. So that's hyphen, not spelled out, but the dash, inspirations-blog.com. And that has a page for the book on that site, as well as my blogs.
Okay.
And there's contact information on there as well.
Perfect. That sounds awesome. I have really enjoyed this. And
Sure.
I'm going to say for everybody, thank you so much for putting this out there and giving us the opportunity to be inspired by it and see how it sits with us and how we can use it to further our own lives in whatever way.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I wish you the most love, light, and inspiration. With all of my love, Katie.